on behalf of my colleague Katarina Sirotuk and the Swiss Fintech Association, I would like to welcome you this morning with our special guest, Kristine Braden, CEO of Swiss Citibank. Kristine will be telling us about the digital innovation in the banking sector and the digital journey that she actually knows very well. She will take only 15 minutes, more or less, on her presentation, and then we jump into the Q&A session. And after we finish our event, we have Rafał today with us, who is also filming our event. And if you want, and if you're willing, if you have time, he would like to run a couple of interviews with any of the volunteers here. So I hope you're gonna enjoy, and enjoy the breakfast.
So one of the things I love to do is to talk to groups of women, and I've been talking to a couple of you guys as we've been getting ready, and it's just been awesome to hear about the things that you guys are doing in this sector. So more power to you. As she mentioned, my name is Kristine Braden. I've been in Switzerland for 2 years. What I thought I would do, and I always think it's interesting to sort of put the personal journey together with the corporate journey a little bit, is I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own digital journey. And then I want to talk a little bit about what's happening with respect to how we're looking at innovation, what our challenges are, what I see in the wider banking business, and how a lot of banks right now are really struggling with what is their future going to look like. Is it one of competition? Is it one of collaboration? But the good thing from my perspective is that I think anytime there's change in this industry, we should celebrate it. Let me start with something. So about 40 years ago, Citibank's CEO then, his name was Walter Wriston. Many of you have probably never heard of him. He made his name largely on one thing that went terribly wrong, which was that sovereign countries could never go bankrupt. Anybody heard of Greece? So he made his name on that. But the one thing that you may not know about him is he foresaw the changes happening in digitization of money already 40 years ago. One of his most famous quotes is that the information about money was becoming even then as important as money itself. And one of the things he did is he found this young gentleman in his consumer bank named John Reed, who then became our CEO a little bit later, who was the first person to find a company called NCR. Anybody ever heard of NCR? National Cash Register. I mean, that tells you everything about that company, right? And they started to implement ATMs in New York. Okay. That was the very first time ATMs were commercialized on this planet. Now, one of the issues they had, and I was recently talking to our CEO, is who's now Mike Corbat, is that they rolled out ATMs really, really, really fast. And they expected it to totally disrupt the financial industry. So they thought that all the housewives and all the people who were going in and standing in line for your bank account, at the tellers, that it was going to be gone overnight. It actually has taken about 30 years for full adoption of the ATM. So one of the things we think about a lot is what is the pace of innovation? And there is no question that innovation is going much faster than it's ever been. But there's also a question, which is how fast should it go and how fast can we cope with it? So I was talking to somebody earlier who is in the cyber area. That's an interesting area for us at the moment, right? Because sometimes when you go too fast, you also have vulnerabilities and other issues you have to deal with. Okay, so in terms of my digital journey, I actually went to Berkeley, and it will date me immediately when I tell you this. I actually got to know my husband without sending emails. We got to know each other with letters. And I remember one of my sorority sisters running home one day, and she's like, my boyfriend came home with the coolest idea. And I was like, what's that? She said, there's this thing called the internet, and it's coming. So this was about 1993, 1994. Okay, so, but I was at that emerging stage of what was going to happen in, the world, basically, in Silicon Valley. And of course, I thought, wow, where am I going to go? I decided to go into finance for a couple reasons which remain very true today. The first one is that finance is never dull. It's always changing. You guys are all testimony to that. Secondly, it's an incredibly creative industry, right? Where any day of the week you can actually come up with something new. And the other thing is that I wanted to have a platform that was potentially global. There's a lot of businesses that are local. Obviously, globalization has changed. But I think one of the things that you guys all probably deal with is the fact that whether you're in finance, you can potentially go global pretty quickly, okay, as opposed to just doing local solutions. And so in 2000, I was invited with the bank to define the internet strategy of the bank. I was relatively junior at the time. But one of the things, and it's been interesting to go through that, we spent 4 weeks in a horrible place called Stamford, Connecticut. I'm from Darien, which is right next door, so I know. But I spent 4 weeks locked in a hotel room trying to think about how is the world going to change. Now, this is at the time of the dot-com boom. And I would say that a lot of the challenges we dealt with then are the same challenges that our industry is dealing with now. So let me just enumerate a few of them. One was, who do we need to hire to help us transform our industry? Okay, and we had KPMG and all these consultants come in, and we went up to MIT and we talked to them about the changes that were happening in the industry. And frankly, one of the things that was also really hard is, where's it all going, right? How do we as a financial industry have a crystal ball so that we stay sort of ahead and keep changing ourselves in line with wherever the industry is going? I would say even the frustrations we had then in trying to put our finger on it are some of the things that the financial industry is still grappling with now. More so because one of our biggest challenges since the financial crisis is how badly regulation has constrained that thing that I really love about finance, which is the creativity of finance. So one of the things I'm excited about for the fintech industry is the fact that you guys can, at least in the starting parts of whatever you're doing, work a little bit outside the realm of really crushing regulation, which right now within the industry is harder to grapple with. But the other thing is just the emergence of new tech, right? In the last couple weeks and months, we've been hearing a lot about blockchain. How many of you here work with a bank? How many of you would say your bank has a blockchain strategy? This is nobody, right? This is a huge area. So I had I had two of my bankers come and say, I bought Bitcoin this week. And I said, can you go to compliance and ask them what you should do with that information? Guess what happened? They went to compliance and they said, hey, we just bought Bitcoin. Do we have to disclose this? Anybody guess what the reaction was? Oh, we don't know what it is, so you don't need to disclose it. But you need to disclose your account. Now, how many people realize that there's no account with a blockchain? They were totally on a different planet, right? So one of the challenges we have is how to deal with that compliance and a lot of our control functions who are also a little bit behind. All right, so all of that is to say that about a year ago, our regional CEO for EMEA started a really interesting project, and it was called Client-Led Innovation. He got the entire management team for the bank together and said, if we don't change as our clients are changing, we will be left behind. So that was sort of the premise of his strategy. But he decided to tackle it, which I'm sure for all of you who work for a bank, you will understand this. He decided to tackle it in a couple really interesting ways. The first one was really around what is the culture of innovation that we need to be developing. Okay, so there's sort of the fintechs are really awesome with their culture, and I remember this in 2000. Do we all need to start wearing jeans and basically change how we're operating? And we decided, no, that's not what we're going to do necessarily, but we do need to create diversity of ideas, and that ideas that are historically, we've been working in a very constrained environment in the banking industry where everything is about how perfect you are versus regulation. How do we move to a world in which you can be imperfect, where you can innovate, where you can take huge risks, right? And so he's been on this journey, and one big pillar of that journey, interestingly, is women's diversity. Because he views that if we actually have diverse opinions in general, we will get to a better place where people of different colors, of different backgrounds, et cetera, actually can all work together and bring new ideas. So one of the things we're trying to upend within the bank is the fact that it's all white men at the top. And when I walked into London 5 years ago, it was me and about 50 men over 50, all of whom were white. Okay, so that's something that we've got to change. But the other thing that we've started to think about, and I think it's something that, all of us are sort of grasping at that vision, where are we going? We're starting to realize that there are some really interesting disruptive themes that are impacting our clients. And so whether it's big data, whether it's payment systems, whatever it may be, most of the clients that we're dealing with are, I would say, on a continuum of completely unaware of what's coming at them to utterly sophisticated about where their businesses are going. Let me give you an example. So, i.e. what I'm saying is that as we actually think about our digital journey, part of it is being one step ahead of that client group, which is going to be very important. Going back to my 1993 story, I always ask people, what happened in 1996? Well, everybody got email. The fact is you can now deliver everything globally in a way that we never were able to do before. But that is now forcing us to change how we do our business. Obviously, one of our biggest issues is KYC and how KYC is challenging. One of the reasons we don't like Bitcoin very much is we have a lot of KYC questions about Bitcoin. And so we're grappling with how does the industry comply while at the same time make it easier for our clients to get things done. We heard from a Fintech on Monday, which basically leaves the KYC difficulties to the bank and piggybacks on bank infrastructure, right? But that doesn't actually help the fact that we have to still do between 3 to 6 months work on each one of our clients that we actually onboard to make sure that from a KYC perspective we're in an okay place. So we still have challenges like that. And so I guess from our perspective, there's a lot of things that are happening within the industry. You've got a lot of new solutions, which are very exciting to us. I think we are grappling with the build versus buy concept, right? So do we build it all ourselves? And actually what's beautiful about what we're doing is that we're starting to do both. Okay, so how many of you have heard of Citi Ventures? Have any of you heard of that concept of ours? Okay. Citi Ventures is our private equity arm that basically scouts new technologies wherever they're emerging and puts a equity investment into it. This is an interesting concept because we've always tried to think about, how do we not squash all of that innovation, all of those good ideas by bringing it into the bank? Because the moment we bring it into the bank, we are concerned that somehow it won't thrive. But actually what we're finding is now we've got really exciting products and services that from those investments we can bring into the bank. One of which Kristine over here works with very closely. It's called C2FO. C2FO is an online trade marketplace, effectively, where we can discount receivables without a balance sheet. Actually, they use the balance sheets of the banks to do this. It's a wonderful win-win. So we've actually invested in it. Now we're marketing it to our clients. And we don't actually crush it in the process, which is a really great thing. That's just one example. There's other examples where we're actually deploying new technologies. How many of you have heard of Tanium? Tanium is a cybersecurity software or infrastructure layer. We have also done a private equity investment in that. We're deploying it to the bank, but we're not crushing the way in which it's actually run. And so that's been a really interesting model for us to work on. What's been also really interesting, and I know a lot of banks are starting to look at this or have already looked at this. The other thing we're doing, though, which I think is interesting and is, again, we're playing with different models, is co-collaboration with our clients. So we've created labs all over the world. We now have 7 of them. And what we tend to do is we invite clients or we invite those who are interested in partnering with us. Sometimes it might even be fintechs. We say, how can we collaborate together? And that seems to be a really interesting model for us. I love the fintech world because you guys are going to continue to bring us ideas, and we're hopefully going to be able to bring you guys some ideas. And in that vein, we have just opened an accelerator in Israel. We had Yuli Maurer, our finance minister, come visit us at the end of August. What was so interesting is they kept asking one question: why do you have an accelerator? And we said, wait, because what they didn't understand is what was in it for us to accelerate new companies. And what we effectively said to them is that if the companies we end up not investing in or we don't end up applying them to our own business, that's perfectly fine. But understanding the ecosystem in Israel, understanding where it's playing, where it's developing, what are the trends, is equally as valuable to us. But we're also glad to see when companies take off, even if they're not super interesting directly to us. And so that's really the third model that we've been developing. And I think all of this is a time of great experimentation and excitement. And we really hope that it will continue, and that I do hope that maybe it's blockchain or something else. We will have something that truly changes how we operate. One of the things that I think is still very difficult is the user experience within banking. How many of you love your bank today? In terms of a personal, yeah, everybody was pretty silent, right? So I think that user experience is also the last thing that we really need to tackle, because, and hopefully we'll have fintech solutions to help us do that.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.